1994年、それははるか土星で開発された。
Saturn from Saturn.
64ビット級ゲームマシン、セガサターン地球新発売。
Sega.
Misclone is a term that's really died down in usage since the 1990s, just like the genre that Mis helped to popularize itself. Every genre and subgenre has its heydays and downfalls, with a good example being survival horror from like 1996 to 2005. In a post-Resident Evil 4 world, for a long time it was safe to assume that horror wasn't a very marketable option for the larger corporations. And if we look back on the 7th generation of consoles, there weren't many horror games, well, in the classical sense that is, being made aside from a few overlooked gems like Condemned and Silent Hill Shattered Memories. It wasn't until the horror game boom of the early 2010s, when games like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, Cry of Fear, and Outlast started making viral waves, that big corporations start to see the writing on the wall. Now we're sort of living in a survival horror renaissance that started about 2014 with AAA games like Alien Isolation and The Evil Within. And while I wouldn't say it's quite as mainstream as it used to be, like in the late 90s, horror is here to stay, at least for a while. But what about the Mis-likes, the Mis-clones? What about the Misties? In the early to mid 1990s, everyone wanted to have a go at that Myst shit. Even our boy Kenji Eno is guilty of it. We of course had Myst and its numerous sequels and spin-offs, but we also had the lesser-known games like Gadget, Past is Future, which is a remake of a game that came out the same year as Myst, and Mansion of Hidden Souls and its well-named sequel, The Mansion of Hidden Souls. Good job there, System Satcom. But fittingly enough, one of the most stylish and atmospheric games to come out of this subgenre would actually be made by System Satcom as well. Not only is it one of the more elusive and rare Sega Saturn games, it is also the subject of tonight's video. So, prepare to lose your mind as we take a deep dive into 1996's cult classic, Lunacy. God, that intro fucking sucked. Released as Geku Genten Toriko in Japan, and just as Toriko in the Eurozone. No, I don't know why it's called Lunacy in the US, so preemptively stop yourself from asking why in the comments, you fucking fiend. Lunacy is the last of System Satcom's free Myst-like games, before they would go on to produce such classics as Are, Mokore, Momotaro, and Running High, Noodles at the Opium Den. How... Fuck, I can't actually say that without laughing. However, the game bears almost no relation to its spiritual predecessors, aside from a few gameplay and visual thematics. This game is also that's... fucking chowing down on those fucking Opium Den noodles. This game's also got that sweet Sega money backing it, so you know it's got some production values. Ah, the good old days when Nintendo was getting its teeth kicked in by the newcomer Sony, and when Sega was willing to fund just about anything to stay remotely relevant. Shit like Shenmue, D2, and this wouldn't have happened if Sega was financially secure. You know, the more you teeter on the edge of oblivion, the more gonzo shit you're willing to do to stay alive. Anyways, rambling aside, this game was also published here in the US by Atlus, a Sega subsidiary that has gained a lot of popularity in the West through their Persona games in the past few years. Funnily enough, the game was also directed by Hiroyuki Maruyama, who would later go on to direct Deep Fear 2 years later. So yeah, a bunch of relatively big names backed this project. But aside from that, what is the Lunacy? The lunacy is the state of being a lunatic, insanity, not in technical use. It was supposed to be like the Kako Demon joke, but it was funnier in my head, I swear. So the game starts off by referencing the Pixies,
Where is my mind?
which is, as we all know, a good sign for things to come. Soon, the screen fades from darkness and into a prison cell. It is here that we are visibly introduced to the game's protagonist, Fred, as well as another character, the mysterious and enigmatic Anthony.
Welcome to the illustrious Misty Town Jail, stranger.
This game really isn't selling me on the names here. But anyways, Fred then monologues to Anthony Banthony about how he got amnesia 4 years ago, along with a rad-ass tat, before Anthony tires of his boring-ass story and he just whips out a jail key from his anus and tells Fred to basically GTFO. Fred then runs around the town for a bit before coming to the conclusion that it is completely closed off. Just then, a goon by the name of Jade apprehends Fred and drags him to the estate of the evil Lord Gordon. It's then that good guy Gordon tells Fred that considering the fact that he has that rat-ass tat, he might have just been to the legendary City of the Moons, a city known for granting its residents eternal life, at some point at least. And that, if he somehow finds the entrance to the city again, he will be spared from the old chopping block. From there, it is your job to talk to the townsfolk, solve puzzles, and listen to Anthony ramble about butterflies or some shit.
Perfect specimens, each and every one.
I suppose.
In order to find the City of Moons. So yeah, while it isn't necessarily Silent Hill 2 levels of storytelling, the plot kept me pretty intrigued throughout. It also helps that the cast was actually fairly decent for a mid-90s Japanese game, with some standouts being the aforementioned Anthony, and the right-hand man of the Kafkaesque ruler of Misty Town, Jade.
Gray's got the franchise on these windmills. Yeah. Pretty good business in a town with no wind, don't you think?
The rest of the cast isn't too bad, with the rather ironic exception being Fred himself. It's not awful like a lot of other games from around the same time, but his performance comes off as a bit stunted. If I had one other problem with the game's plot, and spoilers by the way, skip to this time in case you care to play this game, it'd be the ambiguousness of Anthony's character. It's heavily implied that Anthony has something going on with him that sets him apart from the rest of the residents of Lazy Town, but nothing is ever concrete with him. And at the end of the game, when you return to the town years later, everyone that you save has a tattoo on their heads and amnesia, except for, of course, Anthony. I'm not saying I don't like some ambiguity in my obscure Japanese games, but I would at least like some nods as to why Bald Boy is the way he is. But honestly, it really isn't that much of a big deal. So, you guys ever play Myst? Well, Lunacy plays almost exactly like that. Actually, I think a fairer comparison would be to that of D, as the game uses the same on-rails style of game as opposed to the more point-and-clicky nature of Myst. The big standout thing here is that, unlike D, it doesn't take 40 years to walk down a hallway. Our boy Fred can zoom past this shit in no time flat. Besides that, the game is your standard fare. You find items, you solve puzzles, talk to people every now and then, and ask them about stupid shit like in Shenmue, gather clues, etc., rinse and repeat. Misty Town is a decently sized town too, and while you might find yourself getting lost during the start of the game, you slowly get used to the area, kind of learning it like the back of your hand. Hell, you even start opening up shortcuts as the game progresses, offering new ways to go about the town, which gives off some Demon Souls vibes, honestly. Shit's pretty cool. There's a decent number of puzzles along the way as well, though I wouldn't particularly say they're hard puzzles. Shit's basically find X for Y to make Z happen. However, this game does suffer from the where do I go now syndrome, especially in the second half of the first disc. Maybe I've just been guzzling dumb bitch juice recently, which I have, but boy howdy did your favorite Skelly Twink have problems figuring out where to go. I just kind of slammed and bumbled around for a while until a character gave me a vague-ass hint on what to do next. And a good 70% of the population of Misty Town is just filled with dicks.
Who are you?
Fred, I'm the Traveler.
A traveler, eh? I'm Dr. Morse, and I don't have any use for travelers. I'm Lord Gordon's personal physician, so I don't take appointments. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
I think he did the fucking berserk slide. So let's just straight up murder the big ol' elephant in the room here and address the painfully obvious. The game is aged in terms of graphics. The character models look just a tad bit better than something off of Reboot, and the animations are as stiff as a board. Shit's from '96 and it really looks it. But hey, yesteryear's groundbreaking CGI becomes today's surreal animation. Next to that game. But while graphics might age, good mise-en-scène is eternal. And Lunacy, despite its wonk-ass graphics, still knows how to produce some atmospherically interesting set pieces and locations all throughout its runtime. I think they really nailed the lighting in this game, for one thing. Misty Town is set in basically a perpetual state of twilight, so everything has a dark orange hue cast over it, with long quasi-German expressionist-styled shadows bathing the town. And unlike Kenji Eno's Massive D, I think the team that worked on Lunacy had a better grasp on cinematography in general. I mean, it isn't MGS levels of directorial dick-wanking, but it is certainly better than a lot of other 90s FMV games. The level design also gets more grandiose and surreal as the game goes on, all coming to a head on the game's second disc. And I won't directly say what happens at that point, but I will say it really gave me the same vibes that Half-Life Zen did. There were a lot of oohs, and there were certainly a lot of ahs, but there were also a lot of uhs and hms when the game got 10 times more complex as a result of the new locations' rather confusing layout. Still, though, the game is pretty in all things but graphics, if that makes any sort of sense. So, I actually think the music in this game is its strongest asset, and is possibly my second favorite OST to be featured in these reviews, just behind Michael Nyman's work in Enemy Zero. As someone who took keyboard lessons for all of 1 year in high school and proceeded to never touch another instrument again, I can guarantee this shit is good or your money back guaranteed. I think a few standout tracks are the game's main theme, Traces of the Past, and The Wandering Traveler. Now, my only real gripe here is the audio compression in this game. The tracks here are great, but the sound is really crispy after getting digitally crushed and all. And this isn't just with the music either. Dialogue also got the Shenmue compression treatment too. if you couldn't tell already.
I'm doing fine.
How long can you keep your spirits up? You must know that you have no chance against Lord Gordon.
It's not a super big gripe, but it's a shame that such a good OST is compromised like this. Oh well. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Lunacy. It's definitely an interesting game, and a pretty well polished example of a misclone from the 1990s, and I'd totally recommend playing it. But I wouldn't recommend paying the pretty exuberant prices they post for this game on places like eBay or Amazon, unless you're like me and just hate having money in your bank account. Now, I'm not sure how good Saturn emulation is these days, considering I don't really use it, but I'd just say do that and give Maruhama a $5 bill for the mail. He'll know what it means. Other than that, there isn't really much to say. If you like Myst, totally give this one a go, as it captures the same style as that game, but also has a very distinct atmosphere too. If you don't like Myst games, I'd still recommend at least giving the game's soundtrack a listen to, because man, it's good. Anyways, that's all from me, y'all, and I'll see you when I see you.
Talk about the governments that I control.